to another edition of Africa Peer Review Mechanism Watch. This is the space where we give you updates on everything that you need to know about the African Peer Review Mechanism. And today, it's one thematic area. It's around the state-owned enterprises network. Now, the COVID crisis has affected the entire world economy, as we know, and Africa has been no exception. A lot of the sectors of the African economy are already experiencing a slowdown as a result of the halt in production activities, disruptions in value chain, and other interruptions in economic activities. Severe economic impacts of COVID-19 are expected in the second half of 2020 and beyond, regardless of the duration of the pandemic. African countries so far have taken a range of fiscal and monetary policy measures to safeguard their economies from the destabilizing impacts of the pandemic, keeping their economies afloat so that they can retain jobs and retain incomes. But it's been difficult. The scale of the crisis is likely to prompt shifts in economic policies in many countries. There may be a rethink of privatization efforts ongoing in many African countries because they realize if they're going to sell state-owned enterprises, maybe that may accrue some benefits for the state and so on. But some governments now are more reluctant to sell off state-owned enterprises that have served as a vehicle for ensuring employment, or state utilities that can freeze utility bills as a form of financial relief for citizens. However, reductions in the scale of privatization plans are more likely now than reversals because of, looking for money and realizing that there's no money around. Some governments have actually announced their willingness to inject equity in struggling companies in private firms. Governments have also raised the possibility for states to acquire shares in companies they rescue as a way of fostering accountability, sharing in the financial downsides and upsides equally, or as a protection against foreign takeovers. But in all this, what we must remember is that the state-owned enterprises will continue to be an important part of the discussion for the Africa Peer Review Mechanism. They're probably the one AU agency that is leading on this, for which reason they have decided to discuss, have a series of webinar editions where the African SOEs Network Secretariat, which is at the APRM in South Africa, Midrand, South Africa, will convene a series of webinar discussions to explore government's recent capital injections to private firms and its implications on state-owned enterprises ownership policy and the role that can be played by state-owned enterprises in the continent's economic recovery post-COVID-19. It is crucial to explore the possible scenarios SOEs could play in fostering economic growth, job creation, and overall contribute to the improvement of societal welfare. What the webinar series seeks to do is to unpack the role that can be played by the SOEs in accelerating the economic recovery of African countries post-COVID-19. More specifically, the webinar will seek to achieve the following. A, gather detailed information on countries' policy responses with regards to SOEs. 2, or B, discuss how to turn the crisis into opportunity to better position SOEs to effectively play their developmental and public policy mandate. C, to determine the role SOEs can play in the economic recovery. And D, finally, to analyze the increase in government bailout of private firm and its implication on privatization agenda and ownership policy. So we'll be monitoring this webinar that will come up in the next this week for those of you who want to get a sense of what SOEs are about, what they are doing, and so on and so forth. So that draws to a close the APRM Watch for this week. Next week we'll come up with some more exciting updates. Thank you. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back for the next edition. Welcome to another edition of Ear on East Africa. Nice to be coming to your homes once again. We're going to zoom straight into Tanzania. Tanzania has been the talk of town in East Africa because Tanzania is set to go to polls on Wednesday. Tanzanians go to the polls on Wednesday to vote on whether to continue with President John Pombe Magufuli's brand of development without dissent and whether to extend the Chama cha Mapinduzi's record as Africa's longest reigning ruling party. Magufuli's term saw an investment in mega infrastructure projects, reduction in corruption, with Tanzania reaching lower middle income status 5 years ahead of schedule. He has further promised more jobs for the youth when the construction of the 3.5 billion oil and gas pipeline with Uganda begins. However, he has stifled public debate, human rights, imposed restrictions on media and civil society, which are the main talking points of the main opposition party, Chadema. Chama cha Demokrasia na Maendeleo is accusing President Magufuli, that is the opposition, of putting projects before people and their welfare, and has called for a huge voter turnout, which would send President Magufuli home and restore democratic gains, constrained by restrictions on dissent and campaigning. The opposition goes into the elections with a shaky alliance between Chadema and the Alliance for Change and Transparency, ACT Wazalendo, the other major political party. So still in East Africa, we'll end with Ethiopia blasting Trump over the comment that Egypt will blow up a dam. Ethiopia on Saturday denounced belligerent threats over the huge dam it has nearly completed on the Blue Nile River, a day after US President Donald Trump said downstream Egypt will blow up the project it has called an existential threat. Ethiopia's foreign minister summoned the US ambassador to seek clarification on his comments, which really, for him, was an incitement of war between Ethiopia and Egypt from a sitting US president, which neither reflects the long-standing partnership and strategic alliance between Ethiopia and the US, nor is it acceptable in international law governing interstate relations, a statement said. So there's some stuff heating up between Ethiopia, US, and Egypt, which we'll keep a keen eye on. On energy, construction of the Menengai geothermal power plant in Kenya is complete. According to the financier, the African Development Bank, the construction of Menengai geothermal power plant has been completed, making the East African country Africa's leading producer of geothermal energy. This $108 million project has added 105 megawatts of geothermal production capacity to the national electricity grid of Kenya and will be able to connect nearly 500,000 households, including 70,000 in rural areas of the country, to the national grid. This will also overcome severe electricity shortages caused by the variability of hydropower generation while reducing carbon dioxide emissions by about 600,000 tons as of 2022. So that's some great news coming in for Kenya. And we believe that we'll have some very, very important discussions for you next week, where we'll bring you some great updates on developments in the East Africa region. We're going to take a break in a minute, then we'll zoom straight into the special editorial of Demystifying Tana Forum. We'll be right back. So welcome back from the break, and today we have a special edition of the show where we are seeking to demystify the Tana Forum. Demystify because a lot of people don't know what the Tana Forum is about. So what we want to do with this special editorial, the first of two parts, let me say, is to really explain, first of all, what the Tana Forum is for audiences and going forward, what one can do, ways in which we can seek to engage. So the whole idea behind the Tana Forum that took place in Addis last week, 19th to 24th October. Whole idea was to bring together practitioners across civil society, diplomacy, research field, academic community, bring them all together to have a discussion around the thematic area linked to peace and security. But the whole idea behind Tana Forum is that there's a lot of discussions around peace and security. Why peace and security? Because peace and security, according to the Tripoli Declaration in 2009, where it was seeking to help answer African solutions for African problems, believed that peace and security were the biggest issues around which Africa needed to discuss issues. So Tana Forum is in many ways a response to that call by the Tripoli Declaration of 2009 to say that, look, there are peace and security challenges on the continent. What do we need to do to address them? So, ergo, the Tana Forum was born in 2012. This is the 9th edition, and it's important to state that with each Tana Forum, there's a thematic area. The thematic area this year was the African Continental Free Trade Area, and I'll address that in a minute. There have been different issues which have dominated the Tana Forum discussions over the past couple of years, including illicit flows, including organized crime, and so on and so forth. For obvious reasons, African Continental Free Trade Area, because it is the biggest issue right now, is the reason why some of us were also invited to go and have a conversation to engage all these great minds to discuss peace and security. So even though peace and security was addressed, for example, there were sessions looking at after the African Continental Free Trade Area and conflict transformation, and then feminization and all these other sessions. Even though those issues were addressed, at the end of the day, we still resorted to the issue of peace and security. In the conversation around African Continental Free Trade Area, there is the issue of peace and security that is so glaring, and that is the freedom of movement protocol. If we cannot move freely across the continent, how do we do business? How do we trade across borders? And in that question also is the idea that freedom of movement protocol is so important, because all those member states that are dragging their feet on signing and ratifying the freedom of movement protocol are probably considering the fact that they want to make sure that they do not sign something which will open their borders too freely for everybody to come in. In West Africa and East Africa, we are so used to this kind of discussion because West Africa has had freedom of movement protocol since 1979. East Africa has had it for quite a long time as well. So moving around without a visa is something that is common in East Africa and common in West Africa as well. So we have dealt with the issues of terrorism, Boko Haram, and all these things. We have still never denied the fact that freedom of movement still needs to happen. Let's remember that one of the most important elements of regional integration working is freedom of movement, goods, capitals, and services. When you take it to the highest level around the Continental Free Trade Area, you will know that the freedom of movement protocol is as important at the continental level as the freedom of movement at the regional level is. Like I said, how do you trade when you cannot move freely, where you have to access 2, 3, 4, 5 borders before you get to a country? That doesn't make sense. So all those things need to be broken down. These are some of the things that were discussed at the Tana Forum last week. But most importantly, for us, and something that we need to bear in mind, is that even as we talk about freedom of movement protocol, we need to be able to come up with important examples that help us better understand. And the one that always comes to mind for me is this issue about AMISOM, the African Union Mission in Somalia. African Union Mission in Somalia has been running for about 12 years now. And there's going to be a drawdown of troops. That is to say, troops are going to be reduced by November 2021, next year. As member states, the Peace and Security Council, the UN Security Council, all these important agencies consider drawing down troops from the AU mission in Somalia. Somalia will be exposed because Somalia will now not be protected by an AU mission that is helping fight terrorism. So we can easily say that Somalia, therefore, will be more interested in protecting its territory than maybe signing the Continental Free Trade Area, even though it has signed the Continental Free Trade but not ratified, as far as my recent knowledge goes. Somalia would want peace and security to prevail before it does any trade. I'd like to think that is the most important thing. So therein already lies an example of how the link between peace and security and the African Continental Free Trade Area. Fine, it's good to trade, but if you are not at peace in your country, how would you even be thinking about trading? So these are some of the things that as we go forward in the conversation on the African Continental Free Trade Area, we may need to think a bit more critically and clearly about. And that's why Tana Forum offers a good example for us to think through that whole cumbersome and important discussion, whereby we say that peace and security is critical to Africa's development, and there are different strands through which we can have a discussion about peace and security. But as it relates to the African Continental Free Trade Area, it clearly is a bit tricky. But there are linkages that you can make. One is the one I made, and there are many other ones which I will seek to unpack next week through some of the writings that people have done. They've written quite clearly, made the link between peace and security and African Continental Free Trade Area. And I'll bring some of those examples and summaries next week for us to understand a little bit more clearly why we need to pay attention to peace and security and link it up to the African Continental Free Trade Area. But let's stick still with the Tana Forum. Now, the Tana Forum, we now know, is about peace and security. So that is one thing that you can answer when you are asked. But the next most important thing is, why was it convened at all? And I think we've also established that. It was convened because people felt that if we're going to have African solutions for African problems, peace and security is clearly an important element of that. And therefore, we would need to start discussing peace and security. And so institutions were identified to start helping frame this whole thing about Tana Forum. And then the Institute of Peace and Security Studies at Addis Ababa University was identified as one that would be great in helping bring birth to the Tana Forum, because the Institute of Peace and Security Studies is actually the key institute that is helping shape the Africa Peace and Security Program of the African Union. So it helps frame programs, it helps arrange curricula and so on and so forth to help people, whether they are international civil servants, whether they are researchers, whether they are ordinary people who just want to learn about peace and security. It helps them better understand how Africa's peace and security works through curricula, through trainings and all these things. And so the Tana Forum Secretariat is actually at the Institute of Peace and Security Studies, and the two work together to make sure that the Tana Forum is realized. And they've been doing this since 2012. 2020 is the 9th edition of the Tana Forum. And we've already established that it is about, we've already established that we're talking peace and security. A little bit about the funding is something that I can't really talk so much about, except to say that there are a whole host of partners that support the Tana Forum, which include, even the Ethiopian government. 70% of the funding for the Tana Forum has come from the Ethiopian government in the past, and the 30% has usually come from donors and development partners and so on and so forth, which already shows you how important for Ethiopia this Tana Forum is, because you will see, and when you look at the history of the Tana Forum, you see that there are a lot of issues that touch Ethiopia directly. Ethiopia is not part of the East Africa community, as we have established in different programs on this show, but it is a member of IGAD, which is the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, which has become something like the ECOWAS of the East Africa region because of the way in which it has started focusing a lot more on peace and security issues. So for people writing about peace and security in East Africa, I would even say that don't look so closely at the East Africa community, because they don't even really have that capacity. They don't even really have an architecture as ECOWAS does. But IGAD, on the other hand, which comprises Ethiopia, which comprises Eritrea, Somalia, and so on, some of these countries, and Djibouti, are the ones, and Kenya as well, and Uganda, are the ones that have been actively working on peace and security, how to bring some peace and stability to the Horn of Africa. The Horn is that place of Africa where it links up with the Arab world. So peace and security clearly is an important conversation for Ethiopia because of the role that it plays in the IGAD region. The IGAD region that includes Kenya, Uganda, Djibouti, Eritrea, and so on and so forth. And so it will always have a vested interest in this. But the reason why it's called Tana Forum at all is because usually the conferences are held in April. And normally, if it had not been for COVID, this conference would have been held in April 2020 and would have been held in Tana, which is around the shores, a resort area along the Blue Nile River of Ethiopia. So a couple of hours outside Addis, in fact, is where it would have been held. And in a very informal setting where people would not be wearing suits and all these high things. So they'll just take it easy and let their hair down and talk freely and frankly about how they can deal with some of the continent's big issues. So that is in essence what the Tana Forum is. But this year, why it was so different was because of COVID. So there was a virtual and then there was a physical. The virtual is what some of us were expecting from the 19th to 24th October. But then suddenly out of the blue, we were invited to go and be represented physically. And so, of course, some of us jumped at the chance to do that so that we could also experience the networking. Nothing actually beats meeting the people, exchanging contacts, and having good conversations with them over dinner and whatever else than just doing Zoom all the way. There are some limitations that come with Zoom conversations. And so the virtual would have still been good, but meeting people face to face and exchanging cards and all these things was always going to be a good idea, reason for which being invited to go and actually talk, stand in front of a podium and talk and get your guts out on specific issues around the African Continental Free Trade Area and Tana Forum was good, because then after that, a lot of people's feedback has helped also inform the way forward on what you need to do better or what you need to do even more so that we can all arrive at a better conversation around the African Continental Free Trade Area. So the Tana Forum is a good space to be. It's a good place to go. And it's about peace and security. And the question a lot of people ask is, how do I get invited? Well, it's luck. You get invited depending on the thematic area that is being discussed. Because I have personally known about the Tana Forum all this time that it's been running. I knew when Obasanjo was chairing. Now it is President Mahama of Ghana, former President Mahama of Ghana, who has been chairing, who is chair of the Tana Forum for the past 3 years or so. But it was only this year that one would be invited to go, even though I have a background that speaks a little to peace and security. Still, it would take so many years later before being invited. So it is a bit of luck, and it's a bit of sometimes whom you know. I don't know anyone at the Tana Forum, but it just so happened that they were looking for African Continental Free Trade Area, and I guess I got lucky, and I was invited. But going forward, I think what is important to remember about the Tana Forum is that even if you are not invited, it's important to still be engaged with the discussions. Tana Forum's website is huge, it's rich with all the past 8 years of discussions, the reports of each edition of the Tana Forum, how it went, what it was about, the people who were there, and so on. So it offers a rich, it's a rich rendition, let's put it that way, of how the Tana Forums have conducted themselves over the past 8 years and how you can engage with each report as and when practicable. So tanaforum.org is the website. Feel free to check it out. Feel free also to reach out to some of us who have had the privilege of attending so that we can give you better insights into exactly how it works, how to do the networking and so on. Because in this day and age where COVID still exists, social capital and networking are so critical. It's important to continue building your network of people. Social capital, COVID has not allowed us to do that as well as we want to, but we can still continue to find innovative and important ways to build our social capital. And certainly this Tana Forum is one way in which to do that, because at the end of this 1 week meeting, what we have seen, the people whom we have met and the conversations that we have had are something that is something clearly that will take us so far into the future. The invites that have come for conversations, for meetings, for more Zoom seminars, and all of these Zoom webinars have reminded us that social capital, networking, is so very, 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 very important in the conversation on Africa and by extension Agenda 2063. Tana Forum will always be a space to have an important conversation, whether it's on peace and security, whether it's Agenda 2063, whether it's any Africa-related issues, because it is seeking to also encourage people about Pan-Africanism, to remind them that Africa still has a lot of important things to say, has a lot of important discussions, a lot of important strands that need to be unpacked for everybody to understand. For too long, the African Union has been criticized as a space where people go and have tea and just talk and hang together with admiring their suits and all these things. And yes, a lot of these things have happened, yes. But there have been smart and sharp and great minds who have also come together in these spaces to discuss how to deal with some of the biggest conflicts on the continent. AMISOM, Boko Haram, the terrorism in Mozambique, all these things have engaged the minds of great people, of diplomats, who sometimes are behind the scenes seeking to talk to freedom fighters or terrorists, so that whilst we sleep, they are engaging them to ensure that we don't have to go out on the war front and fight these conflicts. They will do it on our behalf. Peace and security is something that we cannot walk away from. And as we move towards the AU reforms, the implementation of the AU reform in 2021, where political affairs, peace and security will come together as it existed in the Organization of African Unity, we will see that peace and security and democratic governance will have a renewed conversation by virtue of this coming together. And so even as we think through and think about elections, for example, Ghana, we're going to have elections in the next couple of weeks. We must bear in mind that even as we think about our elections, how do we ensure that our elections help contribute to peace and security for our country? Elections should be a peaceful conversation. And yet, for too long, sometimes it becomes difficult and people start doing things that do not inure to the benefit of peace. So, with political affairs, peace and security coming together in 2021 under the African Union, and with Tana Forum's existence, we can already say that Africa is on the right track to really thinking through how to concretely talk about peace and security. Tana Forum is an important space and important conversation to do that. So for those who have not been able to ever engage anyone from Tana Forum, some of us are here. You are free to engage us so that we can also give you some insights. After all, like I said, it is not anybody whom we know that took us there. It was luck and God's grace and whatever else. So we'll be happy to give you some more insights on how you can engage some of the people at the Tana Forum, the Secretariat, what you can do by way of conversation, communication, and so on, so that you can have an exchange of information about what they're also doing in the event that if they do come to Accra, for example, there are opportunities that can come out of it and so on and so forth. But Tana Forum is largely always happening in East Africa, in Addis in particular. And Tana, like I said, is the name of the lake. And even when you look at the logo, for example, it's a baobab tree. That is the logo of the Tana Forum. Is a baobab tree. The baobab tree is the tree under which people would sit and chew card and be informal, dress very informally, and have frank and candid discussions about everything and anything. And so the symbolic thing behind Tana Forum is that it's supposed to be a space where these diplomats and high-level people just come together and, engage themselves frankly and freely. Obasanjo, when he was chair, was reputed to have taken off his bubu and just sat down and, crossed his legs and started, chewing something and started talking to the people. And that is what the Tana Forum is supposed to be about. We have yet to see former President Mahama do that yet. He's still, I think, in his third year of chairing the forum. But let's see what, for the remaining 2 or 3 years that he will seek to bring to the table of the Tana Forum. And we hope that the Tana Forum, the fact that we have former President Mahama chairing, will also help Ghanaians, those who are foreign from Ghana, also engage a little bit better. It is unfortunate that the statement was read in Addis by on behalf of former President Mahama, rather than him being there. We know for obvious reasons why that happened, because he is actively engaged in campaigning. But it would have been nice to have seen him there also discussing, peace and security as at the end of the day, peace and security is still a very critical part of what we do as ordinary citizens, even when elections come. So the long and short of it really is to say that Tana Forum is an important space to be. It is a great place to be. And if even you don't know how to get there, go check out their website. Go check out the people who have attended Tana Forum. There's always a list of participants on the website, tanaforum.org. You can get a sense of the discussions that have been had before. You can even also engage some of the thematic areas that have crisscrossed the past 8 years, and see ways in which you can contact the Institute of Peace and Security Studies Secretariat or the Tana Forum people as well to find ways in which you can be a part. You never know. They may, if you show sufficient enthusiasm, they may always say, okay, come and support us, come and, let's see what we can do to carry the conversation on peace and security forward. But at the end of the day, this is an African-led conversation. Tana Forum is about you and me as an African, in consonance with Aspiration 7 of the Agenda 2063, which seeks to underscore the AU as a global player. It is so very relevant. So let's keep the conversation going on demystifying the Tana Forum. Next week, what I'll seek to do is to look at how exactly the different sessions that looked at after were linked up with peace and security, because the linkages are not always so clear. And even though I gave an example of Somalia and AMISOM, there are different other examples which one will need to understand better, so that for the benefit of us all, we leave a discussion, the two-parter on Tana Forum, better understanding ourselves that Tana Forum is the place to go for Africa's conversation on peace and security. And peace and security is so very linked to Agenda 2063 in so many ways. So let's get serious. Let's pick up our books. Let's go checking out the website on tanaforum.org, and let's continue supporting AAU TV also for the great work that they do on the different programs that they hold, and also on this Agenda 2063. The fact that we're able to be privileged to host these giving us this platform is so great. So thank you very much to all the people who have made Agenda 2063 TV show a reality and continue to support us in many different ways. We are very happy to be speaking to you today, but all good things come to an end. We'll speak to you next week with part 2, where we seek to demystify the actual conversation that was had on AFTA and conflict transformation, so that we can take the conversation a little bit further. My name is E.K. Benson Jr., your regular host for Agenda 2063. Nice coming into your homes, into wherever you may be. Continue the conversation on Twitter at AAU_AAU67, and find it on Instagram as well, and YouTube and Facebook. We hope to speak to you next week. Have a great day. Goodbye.